Right? So when we're in the great outdoors, even your own backyard, ticks, mosquitoes, other biting arthropods might present you some challenges, and they could also influence your health. So let's discuss some of the issues with these arthropods and describe who they are. So ticks, mites, spiders, even scorpions, they all fit into the arachnid family. And then there are some of the biting flies like mosquitoes, and then just biting flies, deer flies, horse flies, and so forth. We have fleas and wasps, or bees and wasps. Fleas also are arachnids again. We have lice. And then there's also bed bugs that you might be concerned with, but more from like a travel perspective, not so much in the great outdoors, but we can discuss them more. For the most part, we don't have reason to believe that they transmit disease, but and not so much with lice either, as much as a nuisance, but some of these can actually transmit disease. But overall, though, disease isn't the only problem. I mean, getting bit or seriously hurt or bothered is enough. But let's speak a little more on ticks. Ticks are becoming more and more of a problem in the United States. They're responding well to climate change, as well as the movement of suburban communities into the forest, as well as cities and suburban communities wanting to bring the forest or plant forest species in their communities. There's a couple types of ticks. There's the kind of the hard tick group and the soft tick group. And hard ticks tend to be of greater concern because they're harder to remove. And they're also more likely to transmit disease. The black-legged tick is the primary Lyme disease vector. So it's what transmits Lyme disease. And Lyme disease is continuing to become a bigger problem as it's moved into communities where it had never previously been. So there are a variety of different tick-borne diseases that exist in the United States. Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, ehrlichiosis, and Tularemia are just a couple of them. With regards to Lyme disease first was noticed in the United States in a community called Lyme, Connecticut. So they probably don't have a sign up there saying, "Welcome to Lyme, Connecticut." And there are all these different conspiracy theories about how the spirochete bacteria, the Borrelia or something, was invented or something by some federal research lab for Department of Defense not far from there. There's no evidence that any of that nonsense is true. But with regards to the fact that it was discovered there, though, is very true. And it's an appropriate place for it to be discovered there because it is where some of the highest frequency of Lyme disease exists. And Lyme disease is often recognized by this erythema migrans bullseye type pattern. And they described it first in 1977 when a group of children had arthritis. And children usually don't have arthritis and joint pain. And they tracked it back to them being infected with this spirochete organism. So in 1981, 4 years later, they figured out what bacterial organism it was. So it was Borrelia. And this particular spirochete, can burrow a little bit. And the deer ticks and black-legged ticks were what were carrying it. So this disease, Lyme disease, is a vector-borne disease. Vector meaning it's an organism that doesn't have a backbone. It's spread by these invertebrates, a vector. This is an example of an invertebrate organism. It doesn't have a back. It's an insect in this case, or in this case it's not an insect, it's an arachnid, it's an arthropod. And Lyme disease actually exists in other countries, in other continents. US, Europe, Asia. So North America, Europe, and Asia. And early in the stage 1, some people may have the bullseye rash. But in some cases, the bullseye rash might happen under a person's head or under their hair, so you may not see it. Stage 2, there might be some other rash and fatigue and hepatitis, some swelling of the liver, meningitis, some swelling of the nervous tissue, maybe the brain, and even some palsy. So Bell's palsy, where they can't control the movements of their face, or just kind of a distorted facial appearance because of it. And then late stage, the arthritis, neurological symptoms, and heart problems. So Lyme disease can be treated. If you get to it early enough, it can be treated more quickly. Most cases are treatable. Antibiotics have to be taken for several weeks. And if you catch it early, just a couple weeks, if the case gets more established, it might take 3 or 4 weeks of constant antibiotic therapy. So in Kentucky, we don't have all too many cases. The cases have been on the rise. And then the cases are often the highest in the Northeast, as well as in the upper Midwest and the Wisconsin area. So where is Lyme disease viewed as being most problematic? So Wisconsin's kind of got a lot of problems with it in the upper Minnesota area. You can see some hotspot around greater Cincinnati. But then the Northeast is really where there's a lot, but even on the West. So Lyme disease is all over, and you can see it exists in the Appalachians. So it's around us. Cases, there's still a few hundred cases that happen every year in Kentucky. Tens of thousands of cases in Wisconsin and Minnesota. The most cases, in the Northeast, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey. And the doctors also look for it too. So there's a lot of people that may have it in Kentucky or have had it, but it doesn't always get reported to the CDC. And those data are a little old. They can test for it by doing blood tests or ELISA tests, enzyme tests, antibody tests. There's a variety of different tests that are out there. But the best thing we should do with regards to it is we should try to prevent it. We don't want to get Lyme disease to start with. And the best way to prevent it is just to prevent a tick from ever staying on a person too long. So the quicker we can get the tick off of us, the less likelihood we're going to have of getting the Lyme disease. And if we can get it off within 24 hours, we can totally remove the effect of the tick bite in terms of giving us Lyme disease. So what's the best way to get rid of a tick? Can we just burn them off with a hot match? Will that make them let go? Put some Vaseline or petroleum jelly on them? Will that make them let go? Grab the tick with tweezers or a tick key close to the skin and pull. So this one's probably the one that'll work. None of these other ones, this is nonsense, these first two. So grab the tick down near the head. We want that head, the mouth parts, we want that out. We need that out. If we take a little skin off with us in the process, so be it. But we don't want the tick's head in there. And if you can grab it with tweezers close to the head, you can usually get the whole thing out. They make this thing called a tick key. So it kind of scrapes up from the back of the tick and it lifts it up and the tick will release. So a tick must be attached to a person's skin for more than 24 hours before it can transmit Lyme disease. True or false? So a tick must be attached for more than 24 hours before it can transmit Lyme disease. So can it transmit it instantly or within 6 hours, 12 hours? No, this is false. Ticks that transmit Lyme disease can take 3 or more days to really increase the risk. So transmission increases with time, so there's no likelihood of getting Lyme disease within the first 24 hours of a tick being attached. If the tick's attached for 2 days, there's a 12% likelihood of getting it if it has Lyme disease. If the tick is carrying that Borrelia, the Lyme disease agent, and it's holding on to you for 3 days, now you got an 80% chance. And if it's holding on for 4 days, you're almost certain to get Lyme disease if the tick had, in fact, the Borrelia pathogen. Other diseases of concern: Rocky Mountain spotted fever. It's a rickettsial bacteria. The wood tick, dog ticks, Lone Star tick. You can see there's the Lone Star right there. They all can carry it. From the time that they've held on to you for a day or 2 or 3 or 4, it can get into you, and then within 5 to 7 days, skin lesions, fever, headache, or even deliriousness will occur. Rocky Mountain spotted fever, occurs here in the upper or the lower south. I mean, we got you can see the figures here. Not all too common, but still does exist. And in certain jobs, like outdoor workers or people who are vacationing in the outdoors, they're at increased risk. There are other tick-borne diseases like ehrlichiosis. Ehrlichiosis causes a variety of different symptoms as well. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but there are a handful of cases of ehrlichiosis. It can be treated with antibiotics. Again, we don't want ticks holding on to us. Moral of the story, get the ticks off you. Tularemia. Tularemia can be caused by contact with infected rabbit tissue, but it's also spread, again, by ticks and even deer flies. Ticks that have maybe bit rodents, raccoons, possums, or deer flies even possibly that have bit them. That's not so common, but ticks are a common way that tularemia is spread. Tularemia is particularly common in Missouri and Arkansas, where the highest number of tularemia cases exist. Again, avoiding tick bites is a good way. Where do the ticks exist? So the American dog tick, brown tick, Lone Star tick, even the black-legged tick, this is the big Lyme disease one, they all exist here. So we have to be aware, and we want to try to avoid tick exposure whenever possible. So how do we remove ticks? How do we remove ticks? So let's look at how we remove ticks.
To the skin.
Right,
apply
so
steady,
to
gentle, upwards pressure with the hemostat.
Notice the whole head come up.
Avoid rotational forces.
If the mouth part stays, that increases the transmission risk.
Avoid squeezing the body of the tick.
So avoid squeezing the body off of the tick, especially if the thing is full. It'll be easy to rip it. All right, so turn that off. So with regards to ticks, we want to remove the whole head. If the head stays attached, and the head's attached for 3 or 4 days, that might increase your risk for getting a tick-borne disease. So which are more problematic? Were the hard ticks the problem or the soft ticks? The answer is the hard ticks. What tick-borne disease is the one that is of greatest concern, especially in the Northeast and the upper Midwest? It's also carried by the black-legged tick. That would be Lyme disease. Don't worry about the test about the Lyme disease. We've got easier tests now. What's the best way to get a tick off the human body? So you want to get close to the head with tweezers or use a tick key, and you want to remove the whole thing from the head out. How long must a tick be on the body before it can transmit the Lyme disease causing bacteria? So more than 24 hours. 24 hours is, if you got it off before then, no risk. Beyond 24 hours, the risk starts to increase appreciably. Other than Lyme disease, what are 2 other types of tick-borne diseases? So we mentioned Rocky Mountain spotted fever, ehrlichiosis, tularemia. Those are just a few of the other ones. All right, so we're going to stop the video here. In the next video, we're going to get into, actually, I'll do a few more questions real quick. Which disease is also called rabbit fever? So what organism or what disease is called rabbit fever? And that's tularemia. And what ticks other than the black-legged one exists in Kentucky? So we have the dog ticks, we have the Lone Star ticks. Those are also here. There are a few other ones. Deer ticks. All right, what's the food source for all ticks? So we didn't really cover this a whole lot, but I think it's common sense. What do ticks eat? What do they live on? This is the only thing that they live on. And they live on blood, so they're like vampires. All right, the next section we're going to jump into the mosquitoes. So I'm going to stop here, and we'll follow up in the next video on mosquitoes and biting flies.